It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but like we're living at a time where testosterone levels are at the lowest they've ever been for men. So basically men in their 20s, their testosterone levels are the equivalent of a 60-year-old man 40 years ago. All right? It's bad.
Crazy.
And yes, because in that, it's a fact that higher testosterone levels will lead to higher levels of assertiveness, focus, drive, libido, all these different things that when you don't have that, you're going to be more lazy. You're going to be less driven. You're not going to be as focused. You're not going to be that man looking like he's doing something with himself. And that's not attractive to women. And that doesn't make them feel safe because it's not only a desire for them to feel safe emotionally, but also like, again, a man's ability to even provide is a level of safety, a level of security for that woman that she needs. Even if she makes her own money, she still wants a man who is capable of handling himself as well. At the very least. Some, of course, want much more than that, but at the least, you have to be able to take care of yourself. And so it's hindering a lot of men to tapping into their true potential. And it's definitely making them less desirable to women. I also believe there was a recent study that was done where they said more men now have given up on dating than ever before. I can't remember what the exact numbers were. And a lot of people are trying to attribute that to women have gotten so ridiculous, so men are giving up, right? and I'm not going to say that doesn't play somewhat of a role, but I believe that a lot of it is men are just unhealthy. You see? So I view it now, a lot of men who may be perceived as lazy and not doing anything for themselves, let's start with looking at what their health looks like, because a lot of them are just unhealthy. They're deficient in certain like vitamin D deficiencies. I know this was one woman, she was having issues with depression, suicidal thoughts, all kinds of stuff. Long story short, told her to try a vitamin D supplement. She did it. It fixed everything for her. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be everyone's story, but for a lot of people, it's just fixing the deficiencies that will correct issues. So going back to your question, I definitely believe the lack of masculine energy is definitely causing women to feel less safe and causing them to feel less attracted to a lot of men out there.
Mm. What do you say for the men that feel like they have commitment issues, or they're like in a partnership maybe for a couple years and they feel like they have a deep love for somebody, but there's just this feeling, and I've had many conversations with friends of mine in the past that have struggled with this, where there's this perception of deeper commitment being correlated to less freedom, like less options. Mm-hmm. And I think it can be switched on its head to where it's actually the alternative. It's the most freedom when your mind's not occupied with trying to figure out all these different options you have to choose from. So just what do you say to the men out there that are, and also the women obviously on the receiving end of feeling like there is a lack of commitment?
So one, I think speaking to the freedom issue, because I am someone who appreciates my freedom very much so. But I've learned you don't have to, there's this assumption that you have to sacrifice your freedom to be in a relationship. I think that's wrong. I think you have to find the right person who can honor your freedom as you can honor theirs in that relationship. And I think if we have honest discussions from the jump, we can see who actually is willing to embrace that or not. Because there are some women who are going to be like, no, that doesn't work for me. All right, cool. Then just don't try to force a relationship with that woman. But someone else is going to say, okay, cool. Like I've found that there's two types of women in this regard. There's the woman who likes, we're going to use the word clingy, but people take that in a very negative way. So I'm going to use a different word. They like a lot of closeness, all right? and they like their partner being home a lot, being with them, a lot of quality time, very high levels of it. And without it, they feel like they're not as fulfilled in that relationship, right? But then there's other women who they like their own freedom. They're out with their friends, family, they're doing things. They don't always have to be up under their man, but when they are with you, they want your full attention, right? They want the quality of it, but it's not about as much quantity as the other woman. So to me, the man who wants that kind of life needs to find that kind of woman. Whereas there are other men who I believe are the majority of men, believe it or not, will fit more with the woman who wants the closeness. And those lines are usually split between the very high-achieving, go-getter men who like to be out there doing different things versus most men who just want a simple life, food on the table, a woman who pleases them, peaceful home, and they're good. They're not wired to be out there. They don't even, there's a lot of guys who don't even care about all the options. They just want one good option and they're fine. And then there are other men who, yes, they have a more natural inclination to explore and try something different, all these different things. So I think it's just about being honest about who you are as a man, having that honest discussion with a woman, and then seeing who's on the same page as you. And that won't have to stop you from them committing to that woman, because you can create your own framework with her of a relationship that you both can thrive in and be happy and committed to each other.
It feels so important that there needs to be a deep spiritual connection for a man in his divine masculine to really have that devotion to a partner, where it's not even a question, you know, and like anybody who's struggling with like leaky sexual energy or thoughts of what else is out there and wanting to taste the rainbow, you know, that kind of fades away when you have, or that voice definitely dampens quite a bit when you feel that you are spiritually committed and devoted to a partnership, which first, of course, like we spoke to earlier, you have to do that inner work to discover that place within yourself and cultivate that own connection. But, you know, I want you to share a little bit about what you think about the spiritual connection that is required for the longevity of a relationship.
Yeah, and I want to say before I get to that, I think for some of the men who are struggling with the commitment part, sometimes it just boils down to you haven't found the right one yet, you know? Because I do believe that there's men out there who, if they're not with the right one, they're going to always be distracted by all the options. Right? Because the one that they're dealing with, there's not a strong enough connection for them to just lock in. But then let them find a woman that is like, this is it. And they're naturally going to pull away from all the other stuff, right? They're going to naturally lock in more. So sometimes it's just about, you have to be patient enough to meet the right person and open to it and not think, why, maybe I'm just not wired for commitment. No, you just need to find the right person you can commit to.
Well, right? I feel like a part of it is like, wanting to find the right person, but then also the discerning piece of making it the right person, you know, like, I don't know. I feel like it's got to be a balance of both, right? And
it's tricky. That's the thing, because I feel like that's actually where a lot of men have gone wrong, is in trying to take this logical approach to, okay, this woman's resume checks all these boxes. So even though I don't feel this deep inside me, this is it, this makes too much sense not to make it, right? So I'm going to make this the one. And listen, some people have successfully pulled it off, I'm assuming, right? But I've seen tons of examples of where that's not sustainable. And eventually, and God forbid that this man, or even woman, because women do it a lot as well, meet someone else along the way that they do feel that deep connection with. And I always say it's very easy to entertain what you settled for if you don't think anything better exists. The minute you experience better, it completely shakes the foundation of what you've been trying to settle for the whole time. And so it's hard, because I know that waiting for that one, that deep connection, one, do you even believe it exists? You know, do you have the patience for that? You may get to a point where you feel like, man, I want to settle down. I can't just keep waiting for this perfect scenario, right? So let me find this woman who's close enough and make it happen. But then again, it tends to, at some point, blow up in their face. So it's tough, but I think that this is where the spiritual part comes in. So for me, one, this is why, like, my approach is, you got to let God guide you in these decisions, right? And for me, it's about praying and getting the answer spiritually. Is this the person? Because I look at it this way, from a spiritual perspective, the spirit can see what the flesh cannot, all right? What we can process and understand is limited. What the spirit knows and understands goes so far beyond that. So if we don't tap into spirit, we don't get the full understanding of what we're dealing with. It's the same way that sometimes you could get a job offer, an opportunity offer that looks amazing. You're like, I gotta jump on this. But if you prayed about it, something in you, your spirit's telling you, no, don't do it. Now, everyone else can tell you, you're crazy. That's a great opportunity, take it. But something is like, no, do not take it. You reject it, and later on you see exactly why you were never supposed to go that route. You know, but again, you could not have figured that out through your own logic and understanding. You had to pray about it. You had to connect spiritually. So this is why it's so important to have that spiritual connection or spiritual foundation in relationships, because it goes so much deeper than the surface, right? So it allows us to have a deeper understanding and clarity about situations and people that we're dealing with. But then once we find that person, it allows us to create deeper bonds with that individual and connect in a way that the vast majority of people never connect, right? And I try to not to always use the word connect because it makes things confusing sometimes, but to bond or to grow closer together in ways that most people do not, right? So I definitely think for a lot of individuals, you got to start with creating that foundation, that spiritual relationship with yourself first. And that's going to make everything easier from there. And then you'll be able to see more clearly, is there truly alignment here? And can we move forward together? Because I also think, and this is very specific to men who have a very high purpose on their life, the wrong woman can destroy the whole thing. All right. Now, granted, that can happen to any guy, right? But I do think that when you are a man who has achieved much, who is successful, who has a great purpose on your life, there's more resistance trying to come your way, whether you realize it or not. There's more factors trying to throw you off track. There are landmines being planted all over your life. And women is one of the biggest landmines that a man has to face. And if you choose the wrong one, that can be the exact setup for disaster. So you have to be careful and you have to be very spiritually in tune to make sure you are choosing someone who can walk this path with you and not someone who's going to derail you from where you belong.
Yeah. And it's a two-way street, right? It goes both ways too for the women out
Absolutely.
there. How important do you think it is to, at the beginning, have the communication of what you really value, and then also for you to journal and to write down what you really want? Because again, it's correlated directly to our own inner work. We don't know what we truly want if we don't know who we truly are.
Yeah.
Once you do that work, you can decide, all right, these are the qualities that I really value and a potential mother to my children. Because otherwise, if you just go into relationships unconsciously, then you're going to be surprised when you wake up 2-3 years into it or later, and it's just not aligned, and then you got to pivot.
Absolutely. No, I definitely think we need to figure that out as quickly as possible. And we have to lay that out with every potential partner. I think the way that we have to go about it, though, is less about what we want, more so about what is needed in order for me to show up 100% in this relationship. So I always use an example like, okay, I may want a woman who knows how to cook, right? But I don't need that. That's not going to move the needle, right? Like, it's not a deal breaker. It's not a big concern. I can meal prep. I've done all types of other things, right? But let's say a woman who is very peaceful and knows how to stay in her positive energy. I cannot deal with negativity at all. I shape my life to stay away from stress and negative energy as much as possible. So if she's a very negative person, regardless, I understand everyone has issues and I'm not knocking you because you have them. But if you're unwilling to fix that, we cannot come into alignment with each other, because I know I can't show up the way that I need to without that positive energy. So we have to recognize, all right, what are those things? And we got to get as specific as possible. Like I make it as a joke when I'm on tour, but I talk about oral sex, right? And I say, like, for me, oral sex is a big deal. And if you're unwilling to engage, I can't do it. Okay? It's not going to happen, because I know I'm going to have some level of resentment and frustration that this is not going down in our relationship, right? And for some other people listening to that, they may say, well, that's ridiculous. How could you make that a thing that you need? That shouldn't be important. But again, if it's going to cause me to not show up 100%, then it's a real problem. It doesn't matter how anyone else feels. So everyone has to ask themselves, okay, what are those things, despite what everyone else may think should be a big deal or not, that is important to you and the quality of the relationship? I want to give one more example of just like really differentiating between want and what is actually necessary. You have women out there, they might hate this one, but you have women who their requirement is the man has to be taller than them in heels. Okay? And I always say, listen, I'm not going to argue against a woman who wants a man taller than her. But in heels, that's your fake height. That's not real height, okay? So, and when you take those shoes off, he's still taller than you, okay? So is that really going to affect the quality of the relationship? So though you may want it, and if you receive it, great, but should that really be on your list to where you're going to block anything that doesn't fit that? You understand? So I think we just have to differentiate what is really actually important to the daily quality of our relationship and our ability to show up in it 100% versus just something extra, icing on the cake, so to speak, that we would like to have, but it doesn't have to be a need or, a necessary thing.
Sure, yeah. People can want whatever they want. It's like, and if you find somebody that's a match to that, then more power to you. Whether it's, as something that's maybe we perceive as silly as being taller than them in heels, or
exactly.
Maybe some women think the oral sexing is silly.
Exactly.
Like, it's just, so many different ways to perceive it. And ultimately, it's just important to know what you want and then communicate that clearly and find that alignment with partnership. I want to speak into the power of pattern versus potential. I think so often we fall in love with the potential of what someone can be, who they could be, but their patterns tell us otherwise of how they're continually showing up. And so I think it's a really important thing to pay attention to, because we might be with somebody for years on end and like we feel like we want them to change in certain aspects, but their patterns are so deeply ingrained. And if they don't have the desire to change that, then you're just going to be living in this fantasy of potential that's not going to translate to reality.
Absolutely. It's another point to that. People are so locked into the fantasy, not the reality. And yes, as you mentioned, there is a pattern that we have to pay attention to. Now, I will say that sometimes the pattern can be broken if the underlying issue is resolved. So if there is a pattern that is due to, so for example, woman meets a man, he struggles with communication, right? And his pattern in all his relationships is a struggle to communicate. But let's say that has come about because he has unresolved trauma from his childhood that has caused him to be fearful of opening up. Now, if you meet him, you address it, and he is now willing to go get help to correct it, that to me is reality. The reality is he's actually taken it upon himself to work on it. If you have to keep trying to drag him to get help, then that's a problem. If you're trying to convince him to change it and you're going to be with him while you're hoping for the change to come, that's a problem. I think if people really want to still believe in someone's potential, then be their friend. Because if they cannot tap into that potential as your friend, they're not going to do it as your lover. Because the reality is that once they become your lover, you've basically taken away the incentive to do the extra work. It's like, okay, well, I already got you. So why would I need to go do this hard thing of addressing traumas and issues if I can just kick the can down the road and keep you here? And if you're not showing me you're going to leave, then I have no reason to do anything about it. So I definitely think people just have to be mindful of, all right, are you interfering with that person's process of evolving and actually breaking their patterns? Or again, to your earlier point, is just who they are? And it's not anything that they're going to change or fix. You're trying to make them into something that they're not, and you can't, again, it goes back to my point of, I remember meeting a woman who fit into that box of she likes a man who's very, by her all the time, loves that level of closeness. And I had to explain to her, like, listen, I'm going to piss you off. I already know. I know how I operate and I know who I am at this point in my life. We're not going to be a good fit. Now, she insisted on trying to adjust. And I was like, no, you're fighting who you are now. You're in denial of yourself. And I wouldn't want you to do that. You have to find a man who fits you and that you're in alignment with. So we have to recognize that sometimes you're going to have that person who will even say, no, I'll fix it. I'll change it. But let's both be honest with ourselves. Is this really who you are? Or is this an even fixable thing? Can you be happy if you make this adjustment in your life? Because some things are going to go against their true nature. And that creates conflict within themselves that then creates conflict within the relationship. So I definitely think we have to consider the pattern, and more so we have to consider, are they willing to take the action themselves to do anything about fixing it?
So yeah, I think just having that clear communication is so incredibly important. And the ego mind wants to jump to try to fix things right off the bat. And I would assert that actually the parts of us that are dysregulated, like those are the parts of us who are not that is coming up. It's not who we are. And so it's like, I think who we are is much more flexible than we often give ourselves credit for. And so people can shift, people can change. And at the same time, the most important thing is just the willingness, you know, because if it's not there, like we spoke to earlier, if people aren't willing to lean in, then it's not going to work, you know? And so, you know, that there's that whole saying of the "you complete me," right? And I found my other half. And I think like it's important to reiterate that yes, you can go into partnership still not feeling whole, and if there is that willingness to resolve what's, you know, what needs to be healed, then you can come into union and find wholeness in that. But if you're going into it with the illusion, thinking that the other person is somehow going to complete you, then it's just a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. And we shouldn't be looking for them to complete us. We should be looking for them to complement us. And again, do they fit with us? Can we create harmony together, right? Because completing is then to imply we are incomplete. And now that creates that attachment, that creates that greater infatuation, that creates that perception of, I need this person. And I know that a lot of times people use words in different ways, and that can make things tricky. But, you know, I view a need as in you literally cannot live without it, you know? And so to me, the only things we need is God and water. That's it, okay? And even some people would argue, well, you can still live even if you don't believe in God. So the point is, this person, though, you're not going to die or lose the ability to function in life because you're not with them. But if you create this perception that I cannot live without them, that's a problem. That's a very unhealthy mindset to have. So I definitely think that people have to look at it from the perspective of complement. And to your point, you know, it's hard to tell people they have to be 100% whole before they enter into a relationship. But if you are aware of an unresolved issue, you should be working on it. You should not let the mindset of, well, everyone has issues as a cop-out to why you don't address yours, and you think you're going to jump in this relationship and it'll just work itself out some way, somehow. Because there's a reason why we have a high divorce rate. And here's what's crazy. You know, people talk a lot about marriage and the divorce rate, but if we could quantify the breakup rate, it would probably make the divorce rate look like child's play, all right? So, and I would argue that the most trauma happens in either childhood or romantic relationship, romantic boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. So we can't just think it's okay to ignore these issues because, well, everyone has them. And everyone doesn't have them. Everyone has maybe had them at some point, but tons of people have truly healed, resolved, and set themselves free from that. And so I think if people change their mindset of how they view those things, then they can allow themselves to actually get to that point of actually being healed and, in essence, being whole. And I think wholeness is more so, in my perspective, about laying the proper foundation, because we're always evolving. We're always growing. There's things that we're going to learn more about ourselves as we continue this life journey. But do we at least have the strong foundation in place? And if not, that's my concern. That's what I would want everyone to work on. And then from there, you can proceed into your relationships.
That's great. So many good reminders there. What do you share for the women out there that feel the biological pressure? Maybe they're in their mid to late 30s, 40s, and they feel the urge to be a mother. They want to have kids, but they haven't found that partner, and they feel the pressure both biologically and also societally. What advice do you have for those individuals?
So I'm not going to lie to you. This is one of those things where I'm going to admit I don't have the right answer, right? Because it's hard for me to look a woman in the face at that point in her life and say, well, ignore the concerns of what happens as you age and now you're limiting your ability to have a child, or completely eliminating it in some instances, and just have faith and move forward, right? I can understand a woman at that point saying maybe she wants to, just find a guy she can have a baby with, or go to the hospital, the doctor, and do it, different alternative ways. I get it. But I do want to encourage women because, one, I think as we look more into holistic alternatives of how we take care of ourselves, a lot of people struggle to have babies later in age is due to how we are not taking proper care of our bodies. And so if we take a better approach, we can at least give a little bit more time and we can have a healthier process. All right. At least for some people, I believe that to be true, if not all. And I believe that depending on where you are, because women can have that feeling in various ages. She could be 40, she could be late 30s, she could be mid 30s and feel like I'm out of time, right? And so I really want to encourage them to take a step back, of course, pray, talk to God, allow him to lead you in that situation, but also understand if you are not having success with finding a partner, we got to start with, are there things you have not resolved? I had a client the other day, and she's like, I want to say she's 41. Now, she already had a kid, so the child biological clock issue wasn't present for her. But, she is still feeling like, I'm getting older, I want to find a partner, and it's only getting harder out here. And she has no problem meeting men, but nothing has been really working out. Long story short, we were able to uncover a lot of unresolved trauma, specifically with her father, that she never thought was having an impact on her. And so us finally doing the work, and fortunately for her, it took I don't want to say what the situation was, but it took a crazy situation that even basically pushed her into reaching out to me and seeking out help. And we even talked about how like it was a blessing in disguise, because had it not happened, she would have not come to me. We'd have not addressed these deeper issues. And now a month later, she's like, she feels better than she's ever felt in such a long time. And she feels free and she feels happier and she's not stressed about the relationship thing. But I know that now, because she's always been able to meet men, by her resolving and removing whatever that negative energy and trauma that was lingering, that was there, is going to allow her to see greater potential or greater results with her dating life and possibly get into a relationship that she desires. So I think it's easy for a lot of people to focus more on, I'm running out of time and things aren't working out the way that I want to, versus what am I overlooking that's getting in my way? What may be hindering my ability to receive the results I want? And I feel it's important to say this. They also get caught up in that perception, because they're hearing stories from their friends and family that are saying, there's no men out here, it's bad, it's this. But what the friend and family isn't telling you is their deeper issues that they haven't resolved, that's derailing their situations. Like I always tell women, when a lot of women tell you their story of what happened with their dating situation, they may not tell you what they did wrong. Okay, they're going to tell you what the guy did wrong. They're not running back to their family and say, yeah, I messed up, I lost a good guy, okay? They're going to paint a picture that either validates however they reacted or how they handled things. And so you're getting a skewed version of the actual story. But the unfortunate thing is that it creates the perception that, man, these men are horrible. This woman she was doing everything right and it still didn't work out. But she wasn't doing everything right. There were clear things that were going on wrong on her end, but she's not letting you know that. So you can't get caught up in what everyone else is saying and what the internet is saying. You have to, I always say this, if you're not getting the results you want in life, there's something that you can change and do better. I don't care if you're a man or woman. I don't care if it's career, relationships. You can get better results if you're willing to make changes. So go deeper and figure out what might be getting in my way.
Powerful. I think it's tough as two men to relate, as best we can intellectually to think what it's like to be in that. But, I've just talked with many women who've felt that pressure, and it's tough to have a solution for that. But really all we can do there, is just provide the assurance and safety and just hold that safe space to let them know that there's so many incredible individuals out there that would be a match to them. And like you spoke to, just resolving what are those energetic blocks that we might still be holding from that coming in.
Yes.
And just because I feel like there's such that deep longing that so many women hold. One of the last things I want to wrap up with here today is, as men, I feel like in Western society, in certain cultures, we have this programming of viewing the feminine with this harmonic, reductionistic, capitalistic view of what a woman is to be for a man.
Okay.
And as we grow spiritually, as we grow as individuals and we heal, I feel like there's a shift that there is so much reverence that gets brought to the feminine, and that it's something to nurture, something to honor, something to protect, something that we want to serve. And there becomes a beautiful spiral of the men serving the woman, the woman serving the man, and
Mhm.
we can reveal even greater and better versions of ourselves. So, what do you feel like as a man that's growing and has evolved? How does the evolved man perceive the feminine and how it relates to it?
That's a very good question. I think first the evolved man understands that we all possess masculine and feminine, right? And even in us walking in our masculinity, we have to be in touch with our feminine side and be able to tap into it when necessary. And I think that when we learn how to do that, we learn how to honor and respect the feminine even more. Because we know when we're tapping into it, it's not a bad thing. So it's a beautiful thing, right? And so I think the way that we perceive the feminine in woman, I think one, it starts with, because when I think of the feminine, I think of freedom. I view the feminine as free. I almost always picture like a woman running through a field and just, hands out and just, skipping through the grass and stuff, just free. So to me, it starts with encouraging women and honoring women being their true, authentic selves. It goes back to that because I'm gonna make this point, and yeah, I'm just gonna make this point. Some people may not like it, but like when it comes to feminism, the feminist movement, right? I always say, to me, there's two types of feminists. There's the feminist who hates men and they're driven by their hatred of men. And it is the feminist who loves women, right? And she just wants to empower and uplift women and wants them to have equal opportunity and all these things. And I always take issue with any woman who calls herself a feminist, but doesn't encourage a woman to be her true self. Meaning, if you're saying, well, you're a woman, so you should be out there having a career. No, that's wrong. The same way it's wrong if a man says, well, you're a woman, you should be in the home, in the kitchen, making me food. No, it should be, you should be what makes you happy. So if you're the woman that truly loves career and being driven, do that, because that's when you're at your true, positive, loving energy, because you're filling your own cup. If you're the woman that values home and family, be that, because that's where your heart is. That's where I think the feminine energy, how we should view it, is that woman being free to be her true self, okay? And then from there, I just believe naturally the woman who is walking in her authentic self, all the other qualities that we can view as feminine, loving, nurturing, compassion, they naturally start to come out because she's not burdened by the stress of trying to fit into different boxes she doesn't belong in. She's no longer worried about all these different opinions and how people view her and all this stuff, because a lot of women are bombarded or overwhelm themselves with the concerns of other people's judgment, okay? And that blocks them from, again, experiencing that true freedom in their femininity. Now, I do believe that for a lot of women, I think more than we think, a lot of them want to be home and all these things. But again, that's not because you're a woman that you should be doing that. It should be because that's what's important to you. And so I think that's how an evolved man should look at femininity is, am I allowing my woman to walk in her freedom? Am I allowing her to tap into her true, positive, powerful energy, whatever that looks like? And again, am I the man who can align with her in the first place? Because there's going to be some of us men who maybe we don't match with the woman who's the career-driven woman, Whereas another guy, he might be the perfect fit for that kind of a woman. Same thing with the woman at the home. It just depends. But ultimately, that's how we honor and respect it and nurture it and encourage it. And that's one of the reasons why I am such a believer in men being providers. Because again, a lot of times people hear me or people say some of these things and they think it's just based off of gender norms and gender roles. But it's really about the dynamic of, by me providing for her, I am freeing her up to not be stressed by the financial burden. You see? But now she can walk in the power of who she is. Now, if she still wants to work and make money, cool. But it's very different to work because you want to versus work because you have to. All right. It's a different level of stress and it's a different level of burden that comes with that. And I would not want my partner to be carrying unnecessary burdens. You see? And so I just believe that in most scenarios, and of course it's going to differ for some people because there's some women who are making tons of money and they don't need a man to provide in that way, right? But in most cases, the ability to provide for her is going to allow her to step into her true feminine role, so to speak, whatever that may look like in her life. And as you said, it has this natural reciprocating mechanism where I'm a firm believer, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm a firm believer that what you pour into a woman who truly loves you, she will pour back 10 times. All right. There's this natural inclination she wants to do for you when you are making her happy and setting her life up in that way. Now, of course, there are men who hear that and say, oh, no, well, she'll take advantage and use you. Then that means she's the wrong woman. That doesn't mean the idea of pouring into her and providing is bad. It just means find the right one who will appreciate and honor it in return. That's it. But I think that when we create that balance and that harmony, we allow both sides to flourish. Because I also think the reality is that for a lot of men, being able to provide or be able to step in that role, it pours into us in a different kind of way. You know, it pours into our confidence of self and how we show up. We get more out of that than she would in most cases, you know? So I definitely think it's just a nice cycle that we're pouring into and that everybody wins.
It's a beautiful place to get to where you feel like both individuals, two beings, have their own cups full. And the times where we don't feel like our cups are full, we can balance and bring that support and love and nurturing energy to each other. And ultimately, I feel like the evolved relationship is where two individuals are living in their highest self, their purpose of why they came to be here, whether that is a podcast or public speaking, or it's raising children and living in the household, or, you know, sports, or like whatever it is, however it expresses itself. It's important to authentically arrive there. And, you know, that's how we can serve the world the best and each other is first by coming into that place. Any last closing thoughts, things that you want to share for our audience before we wrap up?
The only thing is, you know, I know healing can be scary. And I know some people are going to listen to this show and just think like, why is it always about what we have to do and what I'm doing wrong? And it's like, listen, you know, if we made this all about what's wrong with everyone else but you, that would help you in no way. It wouldn't empower you to see better in your life. So we have to point out the areas that you can address and how you can dig deeper. And healing is one of those things. And I really want to encourage everyone, even if you don't think you need to heal, go through the process. I view it like plenty of people thought, there's nothing wrong with me. Well, go get your checkup from the doctor. You go to the doctor and lo and behold, you have an issue you weren't aware about. Sometimes you're suppressing things so much, you don't realize what you're holding on to. So I think it's always good to kind of do an emotional checkup and go through the healing process. I have a book, Love After Heartbreak, that lays all the steps out. And even if you don't get the book, whether you go to a therapist, a coach, I just want everyone to go to someone or take some kind of course or program, whatever, in order to make sure they're resolving the deeper traumas and issues. Because I do believe once we become our healed selves, we can tap into our true selves and we can live life at our highest potential. Hey, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check this one out right here, and I'll see you there. So there's this great quote that says, lust can feel like love until it's time to make a sacrifice. And I wanted to lead with that quote because even though we're not going to really dive into the whole lust thing in this video,